have the power. You, the people, have the power. Let us all unite!
Good morning and welcome to the Frontline.Army daily news show, which you can find on Patreon at The Real Truth 502. You can also find wonderful interviews. We've just finished one with a gentleman from America called George Webb, which will be up sometime in the next couple of days. You can find that by just typing in the Frontline.Army into your browser. And please sign up for our free uncensored newsletter. Now, on the Patreon channel, the daily news show is free, but if you want to donate, all donations are gratefully accepted, and thank you very much. This thing doesn't run on love and kisses. Also, what is completely free is the uncensored newsletter, and on that channel, when you go there and sign up for that, there are dozens and dozens of videos with really important people. And hopefully you will have hours and hours of enjoyment, and certainly will give you news and videos that you cannot see elsewhere, including on this show. And we have guest presenters, and today's guest presenter is the wonderful James Rossi. Good morning, James. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Warren. Good morning.
Good morning. So let's get into some proper news instead of propaganda. Let's have a little look at Israel, specifically the ICC and Jordan. Can you tell everybody exactly what's going on there, buddy?
Well, yeah. I mean, just to start with that, I mean, we've got nearly 22,000 dead in Israel, civilians, 12,000 of which are children. Now, South Africa has put in a report to the International Court of Justice, and I do believe Jordan is as well. And there's a few bits and pieces I want to go through there. So you've got 1 in every 100 people have been killed. 1 person killed every 4 minutes at the moment.
Wow.
And hundreds of multi-generation families have been wiped out completely. Children are severely mentally suffering from shock, trauma, PTSD, etc., etc.
As we've seen in the pictures, yeah.
Yeah, we've seen these in the pictures. Israel's got images of dead Palestinians circulating on Israeli TV on a channel called 72 Virgins, specifically to mock these dead children and these dead people. It's been estimated over 1,000 children have lost both or at least one leg, and the amputations have been performed without anaesthesia. So you can imagine
over 1,000 children, isn't it, without anaesthetics? Yeah.
So you can imagine having your child there on the hospital table being amputated with no anaesthetic.
But James, is it the other side will say he's a Hamas terrorist, won't they?
Yes. I mean, I saw a 2-year-old with an amputated leg. Looked very much terrorist. I'm sure. You know, definitely defence in Israel's side. 80% of children are experiencing extreme stress, causing bedwetting, reactive mutism, and 59% are engaging in self-harm. 55% have suicidal thoughts. Palestinians have experienced mass expulsion from homes and displacement. 85% have been forced from their homes. 60% of homes and lives have been completely destroyed. The deprivation of areas of access, to basic food, water, which is now scarce or non-existent. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Starvation and disease is setting in, and it's predicted that more people will die of this than have already been killed in the bombing and the slaughter.
On top of that, James, we've lost more UN workers and more journalists in this short conflict than we did in any of the world wars. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. It's also very, very correct. I was going to get to that. We've also got 13 hospitals of the 36 that are barely functioning. They've got the very basic bare minimum facilities. 4 healthcare workers are killed every single day. And mass destruction of World Heritage sites across the whole area. And as we said, Jordan is now filing the same sort of court case against Israel itself.
They're doing. They're sort of copying the Ukraine tactics, aren't they? Because when they bomb an area, they wait for everybody to gather around and the ambulance to come, and then they hit that as well. I mean, this is just barbarism, isn't it? Surely all these people, excuse me, surely all these people who are on the various things saying, oh, these are all because they keep banging the Hamas drum. And nobody thinks for 1 second that Hamas are. I certainly don't. And October the 7th and everything else. That was one day. This has been ongoing. You can't target civilians. Collective targeting is not allowed by international law. And the other thing I want to ask you, James, when we're talking about, targeting civilians and everything else, the Geneva Convention has gone out of the window, and these people that are online defending, and nobody says you have to. We don't take sides here; we never have, but we can point out the wrongdoing that is going on, whichever side does it. We're not run by anyone. The amount of money that is put into these media outlets to try and spin what is something that is absolutely disgraceful.
No, absolutely. I think one of the things, talking of October the 7th, one of the things that's come to light is firstly, a large percentage of the civilians killed were killed by Apache helicopter gunships that were flown by Israeli pilots who were ordered to open fire on everything and anything that moved. And also it's now come to light that several tanks shelled several buildings with Israelis in as well. So a lot of the deaths on that day can now be accredited to the Israeli Defense Force. If I was an Israeli, I would be asking lots and lots of questions of my government, because this is something that's unacceptable. Could you imagine the British Army, shelling homes in northern England or in Northern Ireland and killing innocent civilians? Could you imagine it?
Exactly. If we did this, there'd be an international outcry. This just goes to show, doesn't it, the amount of power that Israel actually has over the world, because there is international condemnation from almost everyone. Now, nobody for 1 second thinks that all, I always tend to say there's good and bad in all people. I mean, when you point out the grooming gangs that have been, and that's absolutely fine. And the people who protected that, including British workers who kept very silent on that, those people belong in jail. And if there's wrongdoing, you call it out. I'm quite happy to call that out. Quite happy to call out October the 7th. Why aren't fellow journalists and fellow political commentators willing to call this out? Because this is war crimes on a massive scale, and in fact some of the pictures we're going to be putting up, or you will see, can be quite disturbing. So viewer discretion is advised. We'll have a little look at some of those. Well, I think, and there we are, James. There's some appalling images there, mate. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think if we think about it this way, the media in the West has a lot of Zionist influence over them, a lot of Israeli influence. And the reason why I use the word Zionist is because there's a large percentage of Israelis that aren't Zionists, but the Israeli government and the Israeli intelligence service and the Israeli military is definitely Zionist in its thoughts, in its processes, and in its regime in itself. And they also control a lot of senators. They control a lot of politics. I think it was 40% of Labour is funded by Israeli connections, and it's an even higher. I think it's 50 or 60% of Conservative is. And I know there's a large percent of senators. I know that the media outlets in the West have got a lot of financial links to this
yes.
sort of thing. So when you've got
Piers Morgan, Julia Hartley-Brewer, I mean, you name it. Julia Hartley-Brewer's behaviour the other day was absolutely appalling. Yes,
I saw that. I was quite shocked. I do believe that there's been some complaints going to the Ombudsman, to Ofcom. Sorry, I do apologise. With regards to that being a racist.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's very much. It seems to be the thing now, doesn't it? We get these people come on and they invite people on just to shout them down. If you're going to bring them on, let them talk and let them put their point of view, but don't shout and talk across them.
I think the thing that I've seen with the Western media, in particular, I've got to call the BBC out on this. They've been really bad at this. Is they're very, very quick to come out with, "Do you condemn Hamas?" to anyone who's coming on to talk about the Palestinian side of it. But when they're asked, "Do you condemn Israel for, multiple war crimes, multiple breaches of the Geneva Convention, etc., etc., they don't want to answer it. They do everything they can to avoid it. And I kind of, it's not news reporting. These channels are propaganda channels, in my opinion. That's my opinion.
It is one of them, isn't it? Where you should be able to, like this channel does. Do we condemn Hamas for October the 7th? Absolutely. We also condemn Israel for before October the 7th and the absolute war crimes that have happened after October the 7th. I mean, surely that's not difficult, is it?
No, it's not. And talking of October 7th, again, a quick thought from you on this. You know as well as I do, and I'm sure most people should know, because there's so much information floating around in particular now, that Israel is one of the most advanced security countries in the world. I mean, the Mossad is second to none when it comes to intelligence. The Israeli Defense Force, I think, is the fourth most advanced military in the world. Gaza itself is surrounded by a wall. On that wall, I think it's every 10 meters, there's cameras. You can literally see into every single building of every single apartment. Whatever you want to look at, you can see. They've got motion sensors all around the perimeter and leading up to the perimeter, so they can, if you're walking there, they know. They've got air surveillance constantly with helicopters. They've got guard towers where people are constantly watching, armed guard towers. How did men in little rickety flying machines manage to do, paragliders, manage to do this? How did you get a great big JCBs to come up and knock walls down? Where was the security services?
Well,
where was the military?
You quite as a military guy, and I'm going to tell you this, James. When you have an enemy on your border or an enemy close, you are surveilling the hell out of them. And it never stops, it never lessens, especially when the tension is always high. There is absolutely, and I will state this till my dying day, there is absolutely no way that the Israeli Defense Force didn't know this was coming. It's absolute. You can go, oh, but this, that, and the other. No. But there is infrared, there is motion sensors, there is night vision, as I say, there's night vision goggles, there's heat, absolutely everything is at your disposal. For instance, if you tried to get across the border in Russia in this current conflict, you would be spotted and you would be taken out. Okay, that is a current ongoing conflict. The ongoing conflict with Israel and Hamas has been ongoing for many, many years, and everybody knows the various tricks and things that happen, and there is absolutely no way, not a hope in hell, that somebody didn't know that was happening. We're talking about a cartoon that appeared in The Economist like 10 years ago, showing Hamas in paragliders shooting guns. I mean, this is people are just they're absolutely having the wool pulled over their eyes if they believe this nonsense for 1 second.
Well, no, and I think the other question that I've got to ask you as well is, I kind of think that there's a bit more to this than meets the eye. This is also not something that just started on October the 7th. If you go back before October the 7th, I think leading up to October the 7th, 42 Palestinian children were killed in the West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza by Israeli snipers. Children we're talking about. So take October the 7th out of it, take all that's happened out of it. Before all this happened, this year alone, 42 children were shot by Israeli snipers. Is that acceptable?
No, it absolutely is not. And when you target people in this way, you see, at the end of the day, when you decide that you want to control the people, I mean, when you consider it, when you consider that there is a border with a fence all the way around it, and these people were just fenced in, and these people have, and there are checkpoints and everything else, and they have control of these lives. This is not a situation. This is not a situation where Israel can win against a people unless there's two things that happen during a war. There's capitulation, which means you completely give up or you get wiped out, or there's obliteration, which means you just wipe them out completely. So you've got capitulation where the other side throw their hands up, they give up, and peace is achieved that way, or there's obliteration, and it would appear that Israel are going for the obliteration option.
Yeah, I thought that from the very beginning when they started their campaign, and the way they started it by just indiscriminately bombing buildings, the weaponry they were using, like white phosphorus, bunker busting bombs, the fact they were attacking large civilian areas, hospitals, mosques, churches, schools, UN compounds, medical, anything, basically. There was a report last week in, I think it was Middle East something or other. It's a news outlet in the Middle East. East Eye, that's it. Of an Israeli soldier boarding an ambulance and killing the patient, stabbing the patient to death in the back. So you've got a patient in an ambulance going to an hospital, stopped it at a checkpoint. I think it was in the West Bank. He's jumped in the back and killed the occupant.
Wow. Well, we'll have to see if we can get some extra bits on that. I mean, the footage that we've got on the show today is pretty appalling, and that's the sort of thing that we get. I'm afraid this happens when you have a war, doesn't it?
Well, no, I don't agree with that, because if you think back to British servicemen that were out in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, you would have suicide bombers, and on the odd occasion you'd have kids with suicide bombs strapped to them. Normally they were forced to do it. And I'm sure any soldier that took part in having to shoot one of those children, if it came to it, would have been needing therapy, trauma. It'd have had the whole lot, PTSD from it. It's a child, okay? And we recognise that child, although he's wearing a bomb vest, and although he's been forced to do it, we recognise the individual as a child, okay? For you to indiscriminately kill children, right, as a sniper, which is what we talked about before October the 7th, right, you are no longer looking at these people as people.
No, you're not.
You cannot be looking at them as people. You are now taking the thought process that was last adopted by, for want of a better way of putting it, Western countries, by the National Socialist Party of 1933 to 1945, because that is how they went about killing people and how they succeeded in killing so many people, because they stopped looking at them as human. Once you stop looking at people as human, killing women and children becomes easy.
Yeah, not a thing I could ever do, and I've known snipers that have actually been asked to do that, and they've absolutely refused and been and in a couple of cases have been binned out of various services for being asked to do that on behalf of their country. Not something I could do, sort of thing that happens in Ukraine, I'm afraid.
No. But hopefully there'll be some light at the end of the tunnel. I'm hoping that there will be a ceasefire at some point in the future. I'm hoping that this case goes ahead personally, because I do believe there's been an enormous amount of war crimes committed. And as a decent human being, it's not about sides. It's about doing the right thing. And what's happening is wrong. So that being said, can you enlighten us on what's been happening in Ukraine, please, Warren?
What we've got now is a sort of three-pronged attack. So I'm going to go through the first prong for you. Zelensky has come out and had a bit of a meltdown and said that he needs, bodies, hundreds of thousands of bodies, get rid of people. Well, they've already been doing that. They've had 3 drafts where they've gone, not really drafts, it's 3 kidnappings, really, where they've grabbed people and thrown them onto the front line. Now, we've talked about them sending people who are mentally ill or mentally disabled onto the front line. We've talked about them sending women onto the front line, including, pregnant women onto the front line. This is absolutely crazy. And what we're talking about now is also them beating people up, which they've been doing for months and months and months. This isn't something new, and throwing them onto the front line, saying, "Oh, we've got to do this for the conscription. Oh, no, sorry, but we just have to do it." Absolute nonsense. You've been doing it for ages, and people have actually been going around and killing these military thugs. So there's like a civil war going on the inside. Many of the mercenaries that were sent over, hundreds and hundreds of them, in fact, thousands. Have been murdered by Ukrainian soldiers. I mean, we're talking, and mercenaries have very quickly also turned up in Israel. Ukrainian mercenaries have turned up in Israel, and they're using exactly the same playbook. What you have to also remember is that every single day of this conflict, and for 8 years before, the Ukrainians have taken a time out of their busy day before they were fighting the Russians to bomb civilians. And they've never stopped doing that. They've targeted civilians. These people are ethnic cleansing lunatics, and they are running out of men, and they're running out of shells as well. Now, this is point 2 that I want to come to. Everybody now is suddenly doing this massive thing. I don't know whether you've noticed it on mainstream media. They're pushing this agenda. NATO are pushing it. The American State Department are pushing it. The NATO are pushing it. Is that North Korea are supplying and Iran are supplying Russia with long-range weapons. Well, Russia have had long-range weapons well before any of this. There is no actual documented evidence. We're just getting it from the CIA on the what's the term they use today? Trust me, bro. They're getting it on that evidence. And even if North Korea are, and I'm not saying they're not, even if North Korea and Iran are supplying Russia, so what? Where's the problem with that? Because South Korea are arming Ukraine. America are arming Ukraine. Great Britain are arming Ukraine. The whole of NATO, 99% of the NATO countries have armed or are arming Ukraine. So why is there suddenly this meltdown? Because North Korea, who are friends with Russia, are giving them a hand. According to the American State Department, the whole world should be giving up arms to Ukraine to go and fight these people. So why are you having a meltdown when North Korea are helping Russia? Simply because you want to start putting long-range weapons into the hands of these lunatics. Now, remember, they've been shelling civilians, and they'll do exactly the same thing. And the other lie that I want to get to, let's talk about this idiot Blinken, and let's talk about John Kerry. They are turning around, and this is all to get this package through the Senate, because people are walking away from this, and they don't want to put all the money. They've had 300 billion. Okay, it's not made a difference. Do you think another 61 billion is going to make a difference? No, it's not. Secondly, there are 300 billion in frozen Russian assets. The Americans and NATO just want to steal that and then give it to Ukraine to continue the slaughter. And it is a slaughter and the genocide of their own people. The other thing that is really, really important to recognise here, when John Kerry and everybody else is coming up, and saying all the things that they are saying in terms of, we need to get this money funding and this, that, and the other. It is utter rubbish what they're coming out with. They're saying just one more push and Russia will be on its knees. It's delusional. It's designed to keep the war going, keep feeding the military-industrial complex, because obviously these weapons are now gone. And every time we have a game changer, don't we? We have, and this isn't me saying this, game changer was coined by the BBC and CNN and various commentators, pro-Western commentators or pro-Ukrainian commentators. And we started out, didn't we, with the ATACMS, and we started out with Challenger tanks. And very quickly it was found out that they were no good. And then the Patriot was a game changer. And then we found out they were actually dropping shells on their own people. We found out that that they couldn't stop the Kinzhals, even though they lied through their teeth that they could. And they actually couldn't. They didn't manage to stop one. And then we had, didn't we? We had the wonderful game-changing Abrams. So game-changing are they, and so wonderful are they, that the Americans haven't allowed any of them on the front line because they know they get blown to smithereens. And every single time, these Challengers, these Leopards, and Abrams, Attackams, whatever you want to call it, and now we're hearing the nonsense about the F-16s. Well, the F-16s will go exactly the same way as every other wonder weapon we've got. There is nothing that stops the Kinzhals. The Russians are able to, remember that the Russians are able to, on a war footing now, they're able to outperform in terms of making missiles and shells and everything else. They're able to outperform completely the whole of NATO and America. And the reason they want this money is to keep the conflict going, to try and get a frozen conflict. And you hear, oh, this is not sustainable. And all this is to either get a frozen conflict so they can catch up, or they're about to run away from Ukraine. And I'll tell you why. When they talk about this money, and obviously they're going to put it, but obviously we can't keep up at the levels that we're going, that we're providing at the moment. So that's a tacit understanding of we can't compete with this. This is ruining, not only our economy but every Western economy going. And the other thing that is implicit here, when they talk about Ukraine, and this is where you have to call out the likes of John Kerry and the likes of Antony Blinken, is the out and out lies that are coming up. Russia will be on its knees. Russia were fighting with shovels, according to the BBC and CNN. Russia were, they were taking chips out of washing machines to get various things to work. Nothing could be further from the truth. And this thing is literally giving them the money. And they're saying, we want Ukraine to be self-sustainable. So we're not going to keep funding you, which means we're getting out of the war. Here's a bunch of money. You're going to build a huge military industrial complex in your own country, and you're going to be able to look after yourselves. What a load of horseshit that is, excuse my French. They are not going to be able to look after themselves. There was a huge military factory on the outskirts of Kiev. It got absolutely blasted and took out 25% of their capabilities to fight this war. I mean, this is a huge factory that got leveled by a couple of Kinzhals, these Kinzhals that they were shooting down, and 10 out of 10 have been destroyed, according to Klitschko. Stick to boxing, old chap, because honestly, a politician, you don't need, fancy standing next to a 500-pound bomb and trying to pass it off as a Kinzhal. And they're saying that Ukraine will be able to stand on its own 2 feet. Ukraine hasn't been able to stand on its own 2 feet since this war started, James. Rant over.
No, that's okay. I don't think Ukraine was really standing on its own 2 feet before the war, actually, because there was a lot of corruption in the country anyway. That only got worse under Vladimir Zelensky. And to be honest, the country's in an absolute state now. And when the war's over, it's going to be completely and utterly dependent on America and the Western countries. And, the president of the United States, his son, is heavily involved in fact, he was put up on trial, I do believe, or on charges of fraud, which then got dropped over business interests. Over business interests in Ukraine. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's going to make quite a lot of money out of this situation once the conflict's over. But as for putting more weapons and money into Ukraine, yes, it's costing Western economies a lot of money, and it's damaging Western economies. But we do know that the Western governments, in particular the US, are in deep, deep trouble financially. Their debt is astronomical, in particular the US. The dollar is losing hand over fist. BRICS is a serious threat. And this is what they need this digital reset for, to wipe a lot of the debt and to start again on digital currency. So when we talk about them sending more aid and the effect it's going to have on the economy, I don't think they care about that. I don't think they care about the effect it's going to have on the economy, because they've already planned a digital reset. So for them,
they don't care. And also, what you have to factor in as well, one of the reasons I want to keep this conflict going is you have to remember how much they invested in biological warfare before the start of this. So these laboratories were based in Ukraine and in China for a reason. They weren't having this stuff on their own soil. What you have to remember is some of the things that were going on in North Carolina. Fauci were told to shut down 30 of his worst experiments, and he didn't shut them down. He moved them offshore. He moved them to Ukraine. He moved them to Wuhan. And we're talking about Hunter Biden and the border Burisma that you were just talking there. And suddenly you have $1 billion worth of aid that can go to Ukraine, but only if the Ukrainian government stopped the special prosecutor looking at Burisma, which Hunter Biden was on the board of, and told Joe Biden, and used influence with Joe Biden to make sure that investigation got shut down. And you're absolutely right. They don't care about Ukraine. They don't care about Europe. Europe can go to hell as far as they're concerned. The people what we're trying to get across to people here is the people who are running this agenda will not be touched by this at all, but every single other person will.
Every normal person, every normal working person, middle class person is going to get hit. As for the fact of sending long-range weapons to Ukraine, it's my belief, and I'm sure anybody who's clued up on this, that they do want to provoke a wider conflict there and a confrontation and a war with Russia. That is a possibility that if Ukraine gets longer-range weapons and starts targeting cities deep within Russia, in particular Moscow and that would in effect cause a state of war between NATO and Russia.
Yeah, well, they're desperate to get NATO and European countries involved. And in fact, I did want to mention this because Poland is starting to make some very, very stupid noises since they've had regime change. Yeah,
they are. The Americans are very keen for the Polish to send troops to the front line in Ukraine. They've tried it in other countries, haven't had a lot of success, but they are having some success with Poland. I have been told the Polish government has been promised a hell of a lot of money and financial support from America if they agree to this.
Yeah, exactly the same as Ukraine were, and it'll end up going the same way as Ukraine.
Yeah, but the difference with Ukraine wasn't a member of NATO.
No, exactly that. But by the same token, how many NATO countries are going to want to escalate a war with Russia to the point where people start to think about firing off nuclear missiles? Because that's where, if NATO gets involved, so here's where we go with this escalation. So this is how it works. So NATO troops get involved. Then NATO and Russians start killing each other, and then somebody fires at another country. Suddenly you've got say Great Britain fire NATO personnel very openly fire upon a Russian city. What do you think the Russian response will be?
Well, I think it's a gamble, like you said, and I think if somebody pressed the button or something went too far, it would have the potential to escalate into a full-blown nuclear conflict. I do think these people behind this, high up in the American government and the American military-industrial complex, and obviously the rich people that are funding it, high up in the world, they don't care about that. If it goes that way, they don't really want it to go that way. But if it goes that way, they can work with it. They've got their bunkers. They're safe. They've got everything organised. So if that kicks off that way, they're going to be safe. Their families are going to be safe. And again, it'll be us that suffer. You've got to look at the fact that, yes, we've just talked about the digital reset, which all this that's happening suits that fine, right? Because they want that. That will come sooner rather than later. But there's also, I think, a big push in the Western world for essentially a new world order, like what we had at the end of the First World War and the Second World War. And the best way to bring that about as quickly and efficiently as possible is a huge global conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to finish off, mate, and let's hope cooler heads prevail, but I don't think so. I think we're looking for an even worse.
We're heading for a storm, and we've got no control.
No. The other thing, the last thing I wanted to mention, just briefly before we go, the allegations that came out on the Epstein list. Now, there's huge ones against Clinton, very much against Alan Dershowitz. There's loads and loads of people mentioned. Adam Perry Lang has been proved to be a liar. Jimmy Kimmel has been sweating buckets over that. because he's best mates with Adam Perry Lang, who was the chef on Epstein Island. But they're trying to get everybody to move away from the fact that most of the people, and a hell of a lot of people, have egg on their face, saying that Trump was involved in the Epstein Island thing, and it seems as though Trump is completely exonerated and completely guiltless, where many people who went to Epstein Island or flew on the plane or had visits from Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell with friends coming to visit them since 2008, when it was known that Epstein was indeed done for trafficking. These people have questions to answer, don't they?
They do. I did actually hear, I mean, I need to look into it a bit more, but I did actually hear that Epstein actually had a lot of these people spied on, and he used, funnily enough, Mossad, the Israeli intelligence service, to do the spying, to gather information and intel on them, to essentially use that information to blackmail certain people to great effect. So there's a bit more to this story to come out, actually. There's a bit more to it, and I think there's probably more names that haven't been mentioned that should hopefully come out. But with regards to Donald Trump, yeah, you're correct. He is exonerated. As far as I'm aware, the allegations made against him were false.
But that shows, doesn't it, that how terrible the mainstream media and many political commentators have been, because you have a look at the absolute savagery of which they went after Donald Trump and accused him of being, all these things along with Epstein. And it turns out it's completely false. And yet you don't see any of them turning around and going, I'm very sorry, we got it wrong. These people, the people who did this, who came out with this, all need to be called out, don't they? But because some of them were quite savage.
Well, they need to be honest, politicians in the West in particular do need to be called out on this. They probably need to be called out on a lot of other things that they've got away with. But it does show one thing, Warren. It shows how low and how corrupt the political Western system is,
including our media, which is
absolutely, including. I mean, myself, I'm very particular on which news channels I watch, and BBC is not on the agenda anywhere, and neither is the likes of Sky News. I'm very fussy about what news channel I watch, because I don't want to watch propaganda.
Yes, absolutely. James, it's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for your time today. If you are out there watching or listening as you're driving in the car, please go and sign up for our uncensored newsletter. It's free, and it's, as I say, at frontline.army. If you want to see this show, which is part of the Frontline, go to our Patreon, The Real Truth 502. Type that into your browser. And if you wish to donate, absolutely fine. If not, you can find that show on there completely free. It only remains for me to thank you all for watching and have a wonderful weekend. James, thank you very much for being here. And for the time being, ladies and gentlemen, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
The people have the power. Let us all
The tyrant class are stifling the truth.
Well, then sit down. We've heard your opinion.
The Truth and Network are distorting the truth. Only a handful truly stand for fact, reality and justice. But it's time for change. It's time to bring everyone together with bite-sized, straight-up factual reporting
on the WHO
from a panel of contemporary journalists, each networked in their own field, and unlike others, unhacked, their integrity fully intact. War correspondents, political commentators,
they want us sick, compliant,
natural health advisors, and not to mention the amazing lineup of guests. A daily news show, a weekly roundup show to share with friends and family.
BBC One, the Pedo channel.
Don't trust them.
An uncensored newsletter. All of this for free and aimed at one objective, using the truth to win the war.
Now we're going to turn to people who are on the front line.
Warriors, mate.
The frontline.army. Together we are strong.
You, the people, have the power. Let us all unite. Let us all unite.